I was a police officer in a quiet town. Nothing ever truly scared me. Until the man we buried spoke through my radio, asking for his badge. Since that night, every call feels like it's coming from somewhere no one should answer. And I've learned, some officers never really go off duty. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the Bed. It happened in late October, 3 years ago, just outside a small town in northern Pennsylvania. The kind of place where the woods start right behind the gas station, and the fog never seems to lift after midnight. I'd been on duty for nearly 12 hours that night. My name's Fred Reynolds, 30 years old, patrol officer. My partner, Tom Harper, had been with the force for more than 20. We were tired, cold, and just waiting for the shift to end. At 11:47 p.m., dispatch called in a pursuit, an armed robbery suspect fleeing in a black pickup, heading down County Road 12. The name that came through the radio made Tom look up. "Jack Lawson," he said quietly. I didn't know the name, but Tom did. He stared at the dashboard for a second, like he'd heard it before. We spotted the truck minutes later, fishtailing down the wet road. I hit the siren, and the red and blue lights bounced off the trees like fire. Lawson didn't stop. The chase went on for 6 miles, deeper into the forest, until he lost control on a sharp bend. His truck slammed through the guardrail and rolled into the ravine. The sound was like metal screaming. We scrambled down the slope, flashlights cutting through mist. The windshield was shattered, the airbag covered in blood. Lawson was slumped over the wheel, no pulse, no movement. It was over. I remember the silence right after, the kind of silence that makes your heart feel too loud. As I leaned closer to check for ID, something glinted under his jacket. I reached in and pulled out a metal badge, an old police badge, scratched, the engraving barely readable. Number 213. I frowned. "He's got a cop's badge," I told Tom. "Maybe he stole it?" Tom didn't answer. He just stared at the body like he'd seen a ghost. The coroner arrived around 2 a.m. They pronounced Lawson dead at the scene. No family came forward. The next day, his fingerprints matched a criminal record, so the case closed quickly. Officially, a fugitive died fleeing arrest. Unofficially, something about that badge stayed with me. I kept thinking about it. Badge 213. I'd seen that number before, in one of the old training files, maybe, or a photo in the hallway of the station. It didn't make sense, but the memory felt too specific to ignore. At the funeral, only 4 of us showed up. Rain fell hard, and the mud swallowed our boots. The priest's words blurred with the wind. As the casket was lowered, I saw the badge again, tucked neatly on top of the body, gleaming through the drizzle. Someone had placed it there. Not me. Not Tom. That night, I stayed late at the precinct. Paperwork, statements, standard procedure. Everyone else went home. Around 3 a.m., the building was dead quiet, just the hum of old fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of pipes. I was half asleep at my desk when a faint crackle came through the radio on the corner shelf. The unit was off. Or at least it should have been. The static built slowly, then cleared. And then a voice, steady, calm, and unmistakably professional. "This is Officer Lawson," it said. "Badge 213. Requesting status update." I froze. The sound wasn't a recording. It had that subtle echo of real transmission, the short delay, the quiet hiss after each word. I picked up the receiver with a shaking hand. "Who is this?" I asked. No answer. Just breathing. Then silence. I unplugged the radio, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was interference, maybe a crossed frequency. But when I turned back toward my desk, the paperwork I'd been filling out was gone, and in its place, lying neatly in the center, was the same badge. Number 213. Wet. The sound of rain against the windows grew louder, as if the night itself was pressing against the building. I locked the badge in the evidence drawer before leaving, but even outside, in the parking lot, I could swear I heard the radio again. One short burst of static. Then the same calm voice. Officer Lawson. Badge 213. Still on duty. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I came in early. The precinct was quiet, the kind of cold silence that hangs after a long storm. The badge, Lawson's badge, was still locked in the evidence drawer. I'd checked 3 times. The memory of that voice over the radio hadn't left me. I told myself I must have imagined it, or maybe the badge had been misfiled years ago. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I brought coffee to my desk and started searching the department archive. The old records system dated back to the 70s, scanned files stacked in digital folders that no one touched anymore. It took hours, but finally I found it. Officer Jack Lawson, badge number 213, declared deceased in 1996. Cause of death, accidental discharge of weapon during pursuit. I stared at the screen. The face was the same. The man in the old black and white photo looked exactly like the one we'd buried last week. Same eyes, same expression, even the small scar near his temple. It wasn't possible. The file said Lawson was 35 when he died. That would make him over 60 if he were alive now. But the man we buried wasn't 60. He was maybe late 30s, early 40s. I printed the report and showed it to Tom. He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he rubbed his face and said, "It's a coincidence, Fred. Different man, same name. Happens all the time." "Then how do you explain the badge number?" I asked. 213's been retired since 96. He didn't answer. By the afternoon, the chief asked me to stop digging. "You've been overworking," he said. "Take a day off." His tone wasn't unkind, but there was something in his eyes, like he knew more than he wanted to say. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the voice from the radio in my head. Around midnight, I decided to go back to the station. Sometimes it's easier to face your fear than sit alone with it. When I arrived, the place was empty except for the janitor's cart left by the door. The hallway lights flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the floor. As I passed the evidence room, I froze. The metal drawer where I'd locked the badge was open. Not broken, just unlocked. Inside, the space was empty. I checked the logbook. No one had signed in to remove evidence. No one had the key except me and the chief. My pulse was hammering as I turned to leave, and that's when I noticed the faint static coming from the radio again. It was on, tuned to a dead channel. The voice came through clear, low, almost conversational. Badge 213 responding. Unit on scene. I backed away, staring at the radio. The clock on the wall froze at 12:13. I don't remember dropping my coffee, but the stain spread slowly across the floor like a dark shadow. I ran a systems check, no frequencies, no active transmitters. The signal wasn't coming from anywhere. Yet I could hear the faint background of footsteps, radios clicking, the kind of ambient noise you only hear in a real patrol transmission. It was like someone broadcasting from another time. I called Tom. He didn't answer. I left him a voicemail. "Something's wrong. I think the badge is back." I sounded half delirious even to myself. Around 2 a.m., I checked the security cameras. The feed was grainy, static-filled, but in one frame, the lobby, I saw a man standing near the front desk. He wore an old-style uniform, the kind issued decades ago, before I joined the force. His posture was stiff, almost formal. On his chest, a badge caught the light for a split second. I blinked, leaned closer, and the screen went black. The system crashed. When it rebooted, the recording was gone. Every file from that night, deleted. The next morning, I told the chief. He ordered a technician to inspect the system. They found nothing wrong. Power surge, they said. But that didn't explain the open drawer, or the missing badge. When I sat down at my desk, my heart stopped for a second. Lying neatly in the center, right on top of my report files, was the badge. The same one. Badge 213. Cold to the touch, damp, and heavier than I remembered. There was a note beneath it, a slip of yellow paper, written in block letters. It said only 4 words. Still on active duty. I looked around the empty office. The air felt thick, heavy, like the walls were listening. I slipped the badge into an evidence bag and sealed it tight. But as I walked toward the locker room, the intercom crackled. It was his voice again, calm and close, like he was standing right beside me. "Officer Reynolds, you shouldn't have taken it." The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The hallway was empty. Only my reflection stared back from the window, pale, shaken, holding a badge that should have stayed buried. 2 days passed without sleep. I was still on duty, but my focus was gone. Every sound in the station, ringing phones, footsteps in the hallway, felt too sharp, too close. I kept the badge sealed in an evidence bag inside my locker. No one touched it, but sometimes I'd find the bag turned slightly, like it had been handled. That morning, the dispatcher called me over. "Fred, you need to hear this," she said, handing me a printout of last night's call logs. 3 emergency calls came in from an address on the edge of town. Same number, same voice, an old landline that should have been disconnected years ago. The address, 128, Carter Road. My stomach tightened. It was Jack Lawson's old house. I looked up the property record. The house had been vacant since 1996, condemned after Lawson's reported death. The line was dead, no service connected. Yet the recordings were there. The first call lasted 7 seconds. Static, then a man's voice. "Officer down. Need backup." The second call was shorter. "Just breathing." The third, clear as day. "This is badge 213. Requesting response." I drove out there that evening, against orders. It was nearly sunset, the sky fading into gray. The house stood alone past the last set of mailboxes, half swallowed by weeds and trees. The windows were boarded, the roof sagged inward. My headlights caught the number on the mailbox, 128, barely visible through the dirt. I left the car running and stepped inside through the half-broken door. The air was stale, heavy with rot. The living room was covered in dust, but on the table sat a single object, an old police radio, the same model we'd phased out 20 years ago. Its power cord dangled loose, yet the screen glowed faintly green. The speaker crackled, slow and low, before forming words. "Badge 213 reporting. Officer down." The voice was calm, almost bored, like a routine transmission. I moved closer, whispering, "Who is this?" Static. Then, "Fred, backup requested." I froze. No one should have known my name. I yanked the cord from the wall, but the static didn't stop. The glow stayed. I kicked the table and the device fell silent. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then, from somewhere deeper in the house, I heard another faint noise, a slow knocking, steady and rhythmic, like someone tapping the wall from the inside. I followed the sound to the hallway. Family photos still hung crooked on the wall, faces faded with time. One of them showed a young Jack Lawson in uniform, holding his badge up for the camera. The same scar on his temple. But behind him, half-cropped by the frame, there was another figure, a man who looked exactly like the one we buried. The knocking stopped. The silence after was worse. I pushed open a door at the end of the hall leading to the basement. The steps creaked under my boots. A faint light came from below. When I reached the bottom, I saw rows of boxes and evidence bags, labeled with old case numbers. And in the center of the room, a dusty mirror leaned against the wall. In the reflection, for a split second, I saw movement behind me. I turned fast, nothing there. But the reflection didn't match. In it, the basement was cleaner, newer, lit by bright fluorescent light. And standing in that version of the room was Lawson, alive, holding a radio, staring directly at me through the glass. His mouth moved, but I didn't hear sound, until the real radio, lying broken upstairs, came to life again. Badge 213 to Reynolds. Do you copy? My breath caught. Why are you doing this? I said aloud. Because you answered, the voice said. The lights flickered, and every bulb in the basement popped in a burst of glass. I ran upstairs, stumbled out into the yard, and fell against my patrol car. The radio inside was on, blaring that same voice, repeating the same words. Officer down. Need backup. Badge 213 responding. I drove straight back to the station. The road behind me was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling someone was following, headlights that disappeared whenever I looked. When I got back, I reviewed the call logs again. The system listed a fourth call, time-stamped exactly when I was inside the house. The caller ID was still 128, Carter Road. The recording was 6 seconds long. It started with static. Then came a faint whisper. He's not done with you yet. I deleted the file, but the system restored it seconds later, on its own. Every time I removed it, it came back. That night, I locked the evidence bag with the badge inside the safe. As I was leaving, I glanced at the security monitor by the exit. On the feed from my locker room, the safe door was slightly open. And resting on the floor in front of it was the badge, wet again, as if it had just been pulled from the ground. By the fourth night, I had stopped pretending things were normal. The badge, the voice, the house, they weren't coincidences. Something was tying all of it together, and I was the only one still willing to look at it. Tom had been avoiding me since the last call from Carter Road. He barely spoke at the station, and when I caught his eye across the bullpen, he looked away like he'd done something wrong. That morning, I went into the archive room again. I searched through old homicide files from the mid-90s, looking for any mention of Jack Lawson or Badge 213. It took hours, but I found one folder half buried in a drawer labeled Closed, 1996. The case report inside was thin. 1 page. It said Lawson had died in pursuit of an armed suspect. No photos, no follow-up, no autopsy. Just one signature at the bottom, Sergeant William Harper, Tom's father. My pulse jumped. I checked another file in the same drawer, an internal affairs memo written 2 months later. It mentioned procedural inconsistencies in Lawson's case and a recommendation for disciplinary review against Sergeant Harper, but the rest of the document had been blacked out. Someone had erased the truth. I confronted Tom that evening in the locker room. Why didn't you tell me your father knew Lawson? I asked. He froze, still halfway into his uniform jacket. He sighed. Because it doesn't matter anymore, Fred. That case destroyed him. He swore he'd cleared everything by the book. Did he? Tom didn't answer right away. There were rumors, he said finally, that my father shot Lawson by accident during that pursuit. The department covered it to protect him. They buried the story, and him with it. The words hit me harder than I expected. So what are we seeing now? I asked. Why is Lawson back? Tom looked pale. Maybe some deaths don't die, even when the people do. We both stayed late that night, reviewing what little remained of the old radio logs. Around midnight, every channel filled with static at once. It wasn't random noise, it was rhythm, like breathing through a microphone. Then, over the noise, a calm voice said, Harper. It's time. Tom dropped his headset. His face went white. That's him, he whispered. That's Lawson's voice. The lights flickered. For a second, every monitor in the room showed the same feed, grainy black and white footage of a patrol car driving down a foggy road. On the dash, the unit number was 213. Then everything went dark. When the power came back, Tom was gone. His chair was still spinning. I shouted his name and ran outside. His car was gone too, but the gate guard swore no one had left. I called his phone 6 times before it finally rang back. A weak signal came through, full of static and wind. Fred, Tom said, voice shaking, I think I know where he wants me to go. Where? There was a pause. Then, the cemetery. My father's grave. The line cut out. I drove there as fast as I could. The night was cold, moonlight barely visible through low clouds. The cemetery gates were open. I parked and followed the tire tracks through the wet grass. Tom's cruiser was there, engine still running, headlights aimed at an old section of graves. His door hung open. The radio on the dashboard hissed quietly, repeating a single line over and over. Badge 213. Officer down. Send backup. I called his name into the dark. No answer. I searched between the graves until I found one with a fresh footprint pressed into the soil. The headstone read William Harper, 1948 to 1997. In front of it lay a police badge, half buried in the dirt. Not Tom's. Not Lawson's. Mine. Number 478. A shadow moved near the trees. I raised my flashlight, and for a moment I saw someone standing there in full uniform, Lawson. The same blank stare, the same wet badge on his chest. The light flickered, and he was gone. Only the whisper remained, carried on the wind. It's not over yet, Fred. The radio in my cruiser crackled again as I drove off. This time, it wasn't the dispatcher. It was Tom's voice. Calm, distant, echoing through static. Fred, don't come looking. That was the last time anyone saw him. By the next morning, Tom was officially listed as missing. His cruiser had been towed from the cemetery, but his badge and service weapon were gone. The chief called me into his office and told me to take leave, said I was too close to the case. He didn't look angry, he looked scared. I could tell he wanted me out of the building. That night, I ignored the order and drove back to the cemetery. I had to know what happened. The air was colder than usual, sharp and wet, like the storm hadn't finished from the week before. My flashlight beam caught movement in the distance, just branches swaying, but my nerves were already shot. I found the same grave again, William Harper. The dirt was disturbed, freshly dug. The ground had been opened and closed again, but the soil hadn't settled. I knelt, brushed the surface. The badge that had been there before was gone. In its place was something else, Tom's police radio. Still on, still hissing softly. I picked it up. The speaker crackled, then Lawson's calm voice came through, clear as if he were standing right next to me. Badge 213. Case closed. Officer found. The radio fell silent. Then, faintly, a second voice joined in, Tom's. Fred, it's your turn. I turned back toward my car, but the headlights flickered and went out. The darkness was absolute. I heard footsteps behind me, slow, steady, the crunch of boots on gravel. I spun around, flashlight shaking. At first, there was nothing, then a figure emerged from the fog, a man in a police uniform, face pale, badge shining in the beam. Lawson. Where's Tom? I demanded. My voice didn't sound like my own. He didn't speak. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out a badge. He held it up between two fingers and stepped closer until I could read the number. 478, mine. I took a step back, hand on my holster. That's not possible, I said. You can't have that. Lawson tilted his head, the same blank stare as before. You took my badge, he said softly. Now I take yours. I fired. The sound echoed across the empty field, but when the light from the muzzle faded, he was gone. Only the badge remained, lying in the dirt, gleaming wet like it had just been pulled from a grave. I grabbed it without thinking. It was freezing, heavier than metal should be. My vision blurred for a second, and when I blinked, I wasn't standing by the grave anymore. I was inside an old patrol car. Rain hammered the windshield. The radio beside me buzzed with static. In the rearview mirror, the cemetery was gone, replaced by a narrow foggy road lined with trees. I looked down at my uniform. The patch on my shoulder was older, faded. My nameplate didn't say Reynolds. It said Lawson. The radio came alive again. Unit 478, do you copy? I grabbed the mic. "This is Officer Reynolds." I stopped. The words that came out weren't mine. "Badge 213 reporting. On duty." The realization hit like ice water. I looked at the passenger seat. My service weapon lay there, next to a blood-stained file folder marked Harper, William, case closed. My reflection in the window wasn't me, it was Lawson's face staring back, eyes empty, expression frozen in that same calm stare. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't move. The rain outside grew heavier, drowning out the world. The radio repeated the same words over and over. "Badge 213. Officer down. Send backup." Then, everything went black. When I woke, I was back in the station, sitting at my desk. Morning light filtered through the blinds. Everything looked normal. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it. But then I saw the badge lying on the desk, badge 213, polished, shining, perfectly clean. My nameplate was gone from my uniform. The chief walked past my office, stopped in the doorway. "Morning, Officer Lawson," he said, voice flat. "Glad to see you back on duty." Then he walked away. I looked down at the badge again. The engraving shimmered slightly, catching the light. Number 213. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to take it off, but it wouldn't budge, it felt fused to the fabric. Outside, a new recruit was being shown around by dispatch. I heard her ask, "Hey, what happened to Officer Reynolds? The guy who used to sit there?" The dispatcher paused, then said, "Reynolds? You mean Lawson? He's been here for years." I turned toward the window. The reflection staring back wasn't mine anymore. It was Jack Lawson, calm, expressionless, waiting for the next call. The radio on my desk came alive one final time. "Badge 213. Reporting for duty." And for the first time, I answered. "Copy that."